on. Retweets. Okay, cool. I think we're almost on. Is it on?
Definitely looking at some advertisements.
Yeah. All right. But yeah, it's just gonna be some general interview questions. I have some fan questions for you as well.
Cool.
Yeah. So it should be pretty relaxing.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. Hey everybody, how's it going? I see some people coming on right now. Um, so we're gonna start up right now, and throughout the stream, I'll remind people what's going on. This is John Wee with the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, and with me is Vlambeer's Rami Ismail.
Hey there.
So Rami has been a big friend of the Academy for many years now, and he's spoken at DICE and DICE Europe before, and yeah, we're just glad to have him on. And again, thank you so much. We really appreciate the time and for you coming on and talking
Of
with us.
course, as you said, I'm a big fan of the Academy and your work, so honored to be here.
Awesome. And for anyone that doesn't know by any chance, could you just talk about your company and what you do at the company?
Yeah, so my name is Rami Ismail. I'm one half of Dutch independent studio Vlambeer. We are best known for our work on games like Super Crate Box and iOS Game of the Year Ridiculous Fishing. And currently working on Nuclear Throne, which is our second game to also hit consoles since Luftrausers. Um, and yeah, besides that, we also do a lot of sort of indie community stuff. So we create tools for developers to use, such as PressKit and distribute. And we also try to give as many docs, share knowledge, and sort of like reach out to other developers around the world. So it's kind of a bit of everything. It's kind of how we like it. It's just me and one other guy, Jan Willem. And that's kind of how things started 4.5 years ago now.
That's awesome. And right now you guys are working on Nuclear Throne, right? Pretty much. What are you guys planning on, I guess, in terms of content for Nuclear Throne next coming up and I guess in the future?
Yeah, so Nuclear Throne has been in early access for about to almost a year and a half now. And it was originally slated to be just a short project, like a 10-month project, but we released it in early access, and it actually did really, really well in early access. And on top of that, we grew this amazing community. So ever since, we've sort of been negotiating with the community as to where the game goes and how much work we put in it. And it actually became a much larger project than we initially thought. But for now, we're at this spot where we're getting really close to where it should be. Which is really interesting. It's an interesting feeling to be getting close to the end of a project like Nuclear Throne and just being very uncertain about what happens after that. But it's very exciting. We're working on interface and unlocks and progression curves, stuff like that right now. We have all the characters in the game. We have the majority of the worlds that players can visit in the game right now. So it's a little bit of content, a lot of communication, UI, effects, stuff like that, and then polish, wrapping up, finishing the game.
That's cool. Do you guys have an idea of like when you guys want to release by, or for the final product?
I mean, when we talk with our partners right now, we kind of say like August, September, but you know, those things are very, very flexible, very fluid. We're not stuck to any specific time frame. So while we hope it is going to be August, September, it might be later, it might be before that. It's just, we're just going to see when the game is good. It would be a shame to have such a nice, fluid process and then lock it down to a specific date.
Yeah. And how has the early access scene been treating you? Has it been a good experience for you? Has it been an interesting experience?
Well, it has been a very interesting experience for sure. It was very interesting. Like our original clash with early access was negative. When we started, it was early access has a lot of people have preconceived notions about what early access is, and I have to admit that a lot of those notions are not irrational. Like a lot of developers have exploited early access. A lot of people have made games that they never finished. And that's kind of sad, but it also gives the entire platform a really bad name. So a lot of people had a lot of skepticism, and we set out internally when we decided to do early access. We intentionally set out to try and create a honest early access program. So we decided to update people with live streams twice a week. We decided to update the game every week. Um, and then when we started building a community, and the community and the players noticed that we were serious about, early access as a way to improve our game instead of a way to just earn money,
Hmm.
um, then suddenly the things shifted a bit, and we spent a lot of time talking to our fans. Every time we answered something on the forum, we answered in as complete a way as possible to give the community as much information that they could need to start being a community that represented the game. And as soon as all that sort of came together, it became amazing. Like early access just became this wonderful, wonderful place where, every now and then we still have people being really obnoxious about things, but our community is very mature and very caring. They really care about the game.
Hmm.
I think it's relatively unique to see something like that. So we're a big fan.
That's cool. And for the game itself, like, where did you get your inspiration from in terms of the idea for the game and just creating a roguelike?
Well, so the roguelike is actually really interesting because the original idea for making a procedurally generated game is actually way older than Nuclear Throne is.
Hmm.
Originally in 2011, I think, we were contacted by Brandon Boyer, who was planning to start a website called Venus Patrol, which is an amazing little website, very similar to his old work at Offworld.
Hmm.
And Brandon was one of the first people to ever discover Vlambeer.
Okay.
So he's always been sort of somebody that has been really close to our hearts. So when he reached out to us and asked us if we could do a free game to give away with the Kickstarter for Venus Patrol, we immediately jumped on that.
Hmm.
And we decided to make a top-down roguelike, and we called it Gun Gods. Um, the problem was that we were terrible at creating a procedurally generated roguelike,
Hmm.
so we just gave up on it. And then instead of making a roguelike, we turned it into a first-person shooter called Gun Gods. And that game was relatively successful considering it was freeware and had a very limited release. Became popular enough that it warranted a proper freeware release later. Um,
Hmm.
and then years later, when JW had to do a game jam, a Mo jam, he decided to revisit the idea of making a top-down roguelike and see if it would work out this time.
Hmm.
And that's what ended up being Nuclear Throne. Um, Interestingly, the inspiration for this is as obvious as it can be. It's bad science fiction.
Uh-huh.
It's a sort of like bad 60s, 70s dystopian science fiction stuff.
Hmm.
And I mean, you can kind of tell like every possible stereotype about those science fiction books kind of comes back. You've got the bandits in the desert. You've got the sewers under the city with the mutated like rats and things. Like it's all there.
Hmm.
But then beyond that, like we started creating our own little sci-fi universe with pretty much all of the stereotypes and cliches of that type of universe. So it's really kind of our ode to bad sci-fi.
Okay, cool, cool. And for everyone asking, I do apologize. I am playing right now. I turned the volume down a little bit, so I apologize for the bad play. I know Rami would be very displeased, but yeah, I could
I
see.
mean,
Yeah, go ahead. Go
I would not be displeased. The game is made to make you be really bad at it.
ahead.
Like our goal is for you to be terrible at this game.
But that's the point of a roguelike, right? Where you keep playing it over and over, and you get better at, I guess, the
Yep.
design and everything.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah. It's about learning the systems behind it.
yeah. Um, just, I guess, a fan question, really quick. Someone asked, what keeps you and the whole Vlambeer team, just you and you and Jan, I'm sorry,
Yeah. Yeah.
motivated to keep working on Nuclear Throne and not give up on it, I guess.
Well, I mean, motivation is a very odd thing. It's a very tough thing anyway. It's probably the most important thing in game development. Um, for Nuclear Throne, we have a very easy answer, and it's that this is currently as far as we feel, this is our best game ever.
Hmm.
We've not made a game that was this good before. And for a studio such as Vlambeer, it's kind of a strange situation because every game that we've released has found an audience that really loves it. Um,
Mm.
and this is like also sort of an internal discussion, but we still argue about like what is our best game, right? Like some of us feel it's ridiculous fishing.
Hmm.
One of us feels it's ridiculous fishing. The other person feels like it's still super great box in many cases.
Hmm.
Um, and this is like the first time where we feel like we've actually made like something that is just like, and objectively is a very big word to use here, but we we personally think this is really good, and
Mm.
knowing that we're about to wrap up on something that is really good is exciting. Um, but of course, there's also the long stretches of development where you don't care that it's good. It's just a lot of work,
Hmm.
and at those points, for Nuclear Throne specifically, the community has been a huge help. Like the fact that this is in early access, and that we can read people's opinions, get their feedback, see that they care, get all the fan art. We've got fan figurines, we've got fan fiction.
Yeah.
People are making YV machinimas. Um, there's this whole like culture around Nuclear Throne that has grown over the last 2 years. That's just super motivating. And watching Let's Players has been really huge for us.
Mm.
Like we've really grown to love the Twitch and YouTube communities for just playing the game and slowly going from coherent commentary to like high pitched screaming, squealing noises as they play the game.
Hmm. And let's talk about the community a little bit. There's, both, I guess, good experiences and bad experiences for a lot of people. For you, it sounds like it's been a really positive experience with the fans and talking to the community. What would you give advice for people that are developing games and, relying on the community a lot to help promote it or talk about it?
Well, I think a large part of community is just that they are people, and that in general, if people like the thing that people get wrong, I think, and this is more of a marketing pet peeve than a community pet peeve. I think the thing that people get wrong is they think of marketing as convincing people to love their game, and I think you should look at marketing more as trying to reach the people that would already care about your game, right?
Hmm.
Um, but that also means that by default, people that join your community are probably interested in your game,
Hmm.
and that they probably care about your game in some fashion. And a lot of it is just making sure that there is um, a human to connect to, right? Like
Hmm.
people have already connected to the game. Now you need to make sure that there are people to connect to so that you can form a community. And part of that you can do yourself. Part of that just means that you have to be welcoming, and you have to care about people's opinions, or at least let them know that you acknowledge their opinions.
Hmm.
Because, for example, in Nuclear Throne, we've been very clear from the start that this is not one of those early access programs where the game is going to be shaped by what the community says. Like that's nonsense. Like we are making this game. Like Vlambeer is designing this game. JW is a brilliant designer, if I may say that.
Mm.
That me and JW argue a lot about everything. So me saying that is probably relatively that's relatively special. I would not give JW compliments that quickly, but he's a brilliant designer, and this is really like the design, the feel of the game is him, and we don't want to suggest that somebody on a forum is gonna like steer the direction of development. It's gonna help us inform our choices. It's gonna help JW figure out what to do.
Hmm.
Um, so I think being really honest about that sort of stuff is really important. Like people can smell when you're lying to them on the internet. Like I don't know how that happened, but
Hmm.
like it's so clear when something is disingenuous, and it's surprising how much stuff on the internet sounds disingenuous even if it is sincere,
Hmm.
right? So a lot of that is just letting people know that you are sincere and putting, doing what you say. So for us, like doing the 2 live streams a week was huge, allowing people to connect with us on Twitch,
Mm-hmm.
and then also giving the community itself the knowledge and the information that they need to start taking over those roles from us.
Mm-hmm.
So at first, if somebody would ask us about like how does the random number generation work, we would write a giant article about how the random number generation worked. But then the next time somebody asked anything specific about the RNG,
Mm-hmm.
the community could answer that question because they had access to all of that information. And for Nuclear Throne, we have a wiki that is maintained by a community member, a fan. Um, and when he started doing that, we actually worked with him to make sure he has access to assets and animation files, and just gave that trust to the community,
Mm.
and uh, and hope that that would work out. And it turns out that a lot of people on the internet are good people, even though very often you only see the bad parts in on things like Twitter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just telling the Twitch community right now, um, if you have questions for Rami, by the way, just list them on the chat. I'll do my best to look back and forth. We also have some Twitter questions, so please feel free to ask some questions. Like right now, one question is, I think you kind of talked about this. You're not sure, but and Go Domo asks, what are you gonna do after Nuclear Throne is finished?
So we don't. The honest answer is we don't really know. This has been such a giant investment of our time and our mental like capacity that it's really hard for us to tell what happens after Nuclear Throne.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of don't want to think about that too much. Now, I'm kind of the producer on the Vlambeer team, so I am kind of like exploring what is next. And JW being a designer, like he can't sit still. He always has ideas, but we might just take a break
Mm-hmm.
and like not do stuff for a while because to be honest, we've worked nonstop since we started Flambeer back in September 2010.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, you guys had
and
almost a
Nuclear,
game every year can come out, right? At that point.
yeah, we have a major game every year and a total of 18 releases in 4 years.
Mm.
Some of them freeware and very small, but that is still a lot.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we have all the community stuff, the tools, the talks, all that. So we are human, and we might just take a bit of a rest and sort of like regroup and figure things out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but for now, our focus is like finish Nuclear Throne and
Um,
uh, and see
and,
what happens then.
and talking about a little bit about your team, I believe another question we had from KM Hosni89 is, do you have any plans to expand your team and make it bigger?
So Nuclear Throne's development team is 6 people, but Vlambeer itself is just 2. It's just me and Jan-Willem Nijman. And we started the company when we kind of dropped out of our university. But
Mm-hmm.
one of the core ideas to Vlambeer is that Vlambeer itself is really, really small.
Mm.
So Vlambeer is 2 people, and it's gonna stay 2 people. I don't see any use in growing because that would just kind of limit our goals. Like our goals are to be really flexible, to have a really low burn rate. We want to be able to, I was just talking before about taking a break.
Yeah.
Like if we take a break, that the total cost of that is 2 salaries plus the rent of the office, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's very important to us, that flexibility. So how Flambeer works is more, we call it a network organization. So we try to work with interesting people, and we try to pay them really, really well. We try to make sure that they are happy about working with us.
Mm-hmm.
We try to be very flexible in addressing their needs. If a freelancer on any of our projects like is kind of stuck financially, or would have to take on other gigs, we pay early or we pay in advance. Stuff like that, like making sure that life is good for our freelancers is really important to us, so that if we need somebody, we can reach out to them,
Mm-hmm.
and hire them on a freelance basis. And it makes it really easy for us to scale up and down, and sort of be as big as we need to be at any given time as a studio.
Mm-hmm.
It has its advantages, it has its disadvantages, but In general, like I think we will grow more along those lines, like growing our network, finding new people,
Hmm,
than we would expand our studio because that just sort of stands perpendicular to our goals.
that's cool. And I guess for sorry, I'm getting my butt kicked here. Um, Nuclear Throne itself. Any tips you would give for people like myself in terms of playing the game, either for the first time or as a veteran?
Well, so one of the interesting things in Nuclear Throne, and one of the things that I appreciate most about JW's design in the game, is that Nuclear Throne kind of opens itself up as you play. So
Hmm.
as you start playing, you're gonna pick the safe choices. You're gonna pick a lot of mutations that have a very direct, very notable effect. I see you have extra feet, which makes you faster.
Yeah.
Um, but it turns out that Nuclear Throne has a very lenticular design. Like it sort of opens itself up, and a lot of the very obvious choices are actually not quite as good. And um, a lot of the things that seem relatively odd or weak or kind of like strange end up being good. But a lot of it is about the combination, like knowing which character, which with which mutation is good, or knowing that if you grab mutation A, then mutation B is going to be better, or weapon type A or B is going to be better.
Hmm.
So a lot of it is not surface level knowledge. A lot of it is one step deeper, and you can actually very clearly tell when
Hmm.
people progress from one stage to the other one.
Cool. Um, Sorry, someone was like, "Don't play melting." Is there a favorite character that you have by any chance?
My favorite character is Crystal.
Crystal.
She's a defensive character. She has a shield that can reflect bullets.
Hmm. No, it
Um,
was pretty easy to play. I was actually enjoying it quite a lot.
yeah, Crystal. I love Crystal. She's definitely my character.
Yeah.
Um, I think JW would prefer YV. We're both big fans of both Robot and Eyes. Rebel is is a very much beloved character in the team, and
Hmm.
Rogue. We like Rogue. Um, but yeah, for me, it's definitely Crystal.
And mhm.
It's fun. Like one of the fun things is that we can't agree about what is the best character, and neither can the community.
Yeah.
I guess kind of the way you know you've made a balanced game is when the amount of complaints you're getting about every character are about equal.
And speaking about just I guess the overall game itself, and you said the inspiration, you have a lot of sci-fi elements and a lot of, pirates and thugs and aliens. Is there a direct work or inspiration or, something that you maybe are a big fan of that you took from?
Well, no, I think it's more the idea
Mm,
of that type. It's more the overarching ideas of that type of sci-fi. I mean, we have a very soft spot for old sci-fi. Like it was a bit more optimistic. It was a bit more interesting in what it did. A bit less about um, the world is gone and humanity needs to save itself. You know that whole thing.
hmm.
Like this is a world in which humanity is dead. Like that was it. It's over. And now we have colorful beings, right? Like
Hmm.
it's not everything is grim and dark and sort of like sure it is a dystopian world and this is a very desperate world. Like beneath the colorful like sort of world, this is not a good place to live. Um, but it's a very different flavor, very different tone of sci-fi. It's the kind of sci-fi where people still believe that under the clouds of Venus there were dinosaurs,
Okay.
right? Like it's a bit more naive, a bit more rich of fantasy, a bit less focused on trying to explain how the engine of a spacecraft works or whatever. It's just like it works,
Hmm.
whatever. Like this is cool. We can do cool stuff with it. There's a desert. There's like potentially some sort of like June worm in there somewhere. We don't care. It's a desert. It's cool.
Do you really think about like the world building quite a lot when you're making this game, or is it more like you were saying the transmedia and your fans creating the world around it?
It's a little bit of both. Like we have a huge sort of like world building
Hmm.
tendency. Like all of our worlds have. giant backdrops, giant backgrounds. We have backgrounds for our characters, but we try to be very subtle in revealing those. So Super Crate Box has a story,
Mm-hmm.
and Ridiculous Fishing for those in the stream that finished it, it has a story, and we actually kind of tell you about it. And Nuclear Throne is very similar. Like all of the characters have their backstory, all of the worlds have their backstory, the bosses have their backstory. We have a timeline that spans like a few thousand years for the
Mm-hmm.
entire world, and explanations for pretty much everything in here. For us, it's very important to have a coherent world, and I think a lot of how we work with our freelancers is built around that as well. It's less about telling them this is what we need, and more about just sitting them down and talking about what this world is. We have a folder full of like pictures that are like direct or indirect inspirations.
Mm.
We talk about the characters and the world and kind of like the feelings that we're trying to evoke, the game we're trying to make, but we don't tell them like make this,
Yeah.
right? We um, we ask them to put their interpretation of what we told them in there. You kind of need a coherent world. You kind of need a coherent like universe to allow people to do that, to really allow them um, to figure something out. And actually, one of the most fascinating things about Nuclear Throne is that the biggest course change we had in the game was really, really early on when our musician Yukio actually created a song that was a lot more country western than we thought it should be.
Mm-hmm.
It's the credit song, which was created very, very early on, but isn't actually in the game yet. And it's this sort of like guitar sort of it's this guitar song with like a lone voice singing, and we kind of imagined like a campfire
Uh-huh.
and somebody sitting at the campfire singing that, and that ended up informing a lot of not just Fish's design, but also sort of the narrative arc for the game.
Hmm.
And most notably, the main menu, which is literally the campfire that we imagined listening to the song. So,
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So it's fun. I think it's a very good practice to let creative people um, dabble in your world instead of telling them what to make.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we were any good at music, we'd make the music ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the reason we hired somebody to do that is because we trust their creative view when it comes to creating that. And the same thing with art, same thing with sound design. So instead of telling people this is what we want, we kind of go like, here's a world, we need your interpretation of this.
Hmm. And going back to a fan question, hold on, where is it? I saw it. Saturo11 said, you've been talking a lot about language and culture in your recent talks. Where do you think the biggest challenge are for game devs that are in those areas, if that makes any sense?
I mean, to me, it seems that one of the biggest barriers in the world is still the language barrier, and it's a very insidious sort of thing. It's hard to communicate just how impactful languages on your ability to sustain yourself in the industry, because you hear a lot of people in the press, for example, have this very strict tip that they give indies or independent developers, where they say like, have somebody proofread your press release, because if we see a typo, we know you don't take it seriously. And while I understand where they're coming from, the reality is that for a lot of people around the world, perfect English is not something you can aspire to. Like
Mm-hmm.
I I make mistakes. Like I have a very Dutch tendency where I accidentally use apostrophe s in plurals, which
Mm-hmm.
is super super silly, and probably not something I should do. But that's how Dutch works. Um,
Hmm.
so it's kind of like that language barrier puts a lot of things in the way, and then on top of that, the industry is clearly focused around the Western world. So if you live in like Central Africa, A, you don't have access to like perfect English very often, and B, like getting to like E3 is unaffordable,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or to GDC. Um, so there's a lot of barriers there. Some of them are socioeconomic, some of them are related to language. A lot of stuff we can fix as an industry by like actively looking in that direction.
Hmm.
And that's kind of what I'm trying to do. But yeah, it's a super fascinating sort of challenge. It's a super interesting um, it's a super interesting problem to think about. Is like how can we fix that? And part of that is my GameDev.world initiative, which I'm sure if you Google for GameDev.world, you'll find some information on what that is. But essentially, it's creating a library in the major languages of the world about game development.
Mm. And that kind of brings me to your dice talk a little bit as well. You were talking about a lot of tools and things you were working on, and that was already in the internet sphere that people can use to help them, build a game and work on games. Yeah, I don't know if you remember the talk very much, but do you have any
Yeah, I do.
updates or any things you would add to that talk in terms of things that would help out new game developers or indie game developers?
I mean, I think a lot of the tools that existed back then are still super relevant. I mentioned Promoter app. I mentioned Pixel Perspector. I mentioned the variety of engines and tools people can use. And I think what is interesting is that sort of like process that I was alluding to in the talk of democratizing development has just continued and has
Hmm.
grown stronger than ever before. Um, and for example, a UDK going essentially free with a royalty if you earn money.
Hmm.
That's a huge deal that the industry has caught on to the fact that development tools should probably be free unless you earn money with it, right?
Yeah.
Like tinkering in the games industry should be free. Um, and that is a very powerful idea, I think, and that's a very powerful movement in the games industry, is allowing more people more access to the tools they need or want to make games.
Hmm.
And then effectively, you create this interesting problem with, okay, I made something interesting. Now, what do I do with it? Where suddenly there's this huge open space of what do you do there, right? Like, so you see
Hmm.
a lot of like boutique publishers. You see a lot of help on self-publishing, press kit, distribute, help indies remain independent from publishers. But like publishers like Devolver Digital, for example, also help out with stuff like that.
Hmm.
Or people that do individual help for PR, like Meyer, Felix Kramer, like that sort of stuff is just it's a very interesting shift. I think there's a lot of interesting problems in the industry right now.
Yeah.
Um, and part of that is related to the fact that now it is really, really simple to start tinkering in games. And that means you get a lot of interesting stuff that doesn't really fit what we know.
Hmm.
What do you do with that?
Yeah. I don't know if this is possible from a community's perspective or from a gamer perspective. How can they help in terms of giving good feedback or giving help to game developers or indie game developers?
I think a lot of that is just like sort of spending the time on it, I guess.
Hmm.
I mean, being a gamer is a very, very different perspective from being a developer. Like there are a lot of gamers that have an interest in development or that are fascinated by the process of development.
Hmm.
But the reality is that like if if you become a developer, you kind of have to give up gaming in a strange way, not in that you can't game anymore,
Hmm.
but in that you will never be able to look at a video game as a video game again,
Hmm.
right? You will never be able to be as immersed in a game as you would be otherwise, because now the way you look at games is like, how is this made?
Hmm.
Right? How is the balance? Where's the progress curve? Can I see the seams? Do I see the faults? What do you think the intent of the designer was here? Like, what are they trying to accomplish? Like, is it working?
Hmm.
Um, like, I know a lot of people praise the first 15 minutes of The Last of Us, right?
Hmm.
Because it's such a powerful, powerful moment, and you play as the daughter, and then you switch to the main character,
Yeah.
and then the daughter dies, and it's super, super powerful. And a lot of people like sat there and like started playing the game. What I did when I played that moment is I turned off my PlayStation and I rebooted it and I
Hmm.
played that entire sequence again, very, very carefully looking at why the hell I was affected by this,
Yeah.
because I didn't expect that. Like I didn't like I've seen so many AAA games kill a character that I was supposed to care about, and then not care. And then suddenly here I was just staring at the screen, just being like, whoa, I'm affected by this. How did they do that?
Hmm.
Instead of like, well, I'm affected by this. Let's go on the emotional roller coaster ride that is this video game.
Yeah.
I shut down the game and went back.
Huh.
Um, and that's kind of like it's something you give up and something you gain, I guess. But it also means that how can gamers help with something like this is just by, if you love something, let the developer know.
Mm-hmm.
It's the internet is a place full of negativity, and just adding that one positive voice to it can help so much. Like
Mm.
one email can help so much. And if you care about the game, you don't have to be afraid to be critical of it. And that's the other thing. The thing with feedback that we learned in the Nuclear Throne community, and the big shift that happened in there that made feedback so much more pleasant,
Mm-hmm.
is originally a lot of gamers think that the way to report problems is by trying to report solutions,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they go like, well, for example, on the stream right now, you are fighting Big Bandit, and a lot of people go like, okay, Big Bandit is too easy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Although that moment is probably gone by the time this audio comes in. But they say like Big Bandit is too easy. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like that might be a thing you feel, but that is not necessarily the problem. The problem there is they've become accustomed to Big Bandit, right? It's the fight is relatively too easy for them, but if I watch a lot of new players sort of get used to the game, and Big Bandit is way too hard,
Mm.
right? Um, so people started learning to report problems instead of solutions. So instead of saying like you have to make Big Bandit harder, they said, well, I'm sort of starting to get bored with the desert.
Mm.
It's like, okay, that is cool. That is good. Now this is useful. Instead of saying like this gun needs to be more powerful, they started saying like, okay, I think this gun might happen to early in the game or might be available to early in the game. And like that sort of stuff is way more useful to us because as as a user, you're never going to see all the considerations and all the little things that happen in the game unless you have access to the full source code and the time to like figure everything out.
Yeah.
So there's probably like things that we are considering that are hard to consider from the perspective of a single user.
Mm-hmm.
But what is true is that any feeling a player has with regards to this game is a true feeling. You can't have a wrong opinion about a video game. Like it's just your opinion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so people starting to like report on that more as a I feel and less as a this should be
Mm-hmm.
has been huge, and I think that is the most that is probably the best thing you can do as a gamer is realize that nobody ever sets out to make a bad game,
Mm.
and that um, the honest reality is that development is really really hard and complicated and weird and messed up, and making sure that to make that process easier, that is huge.
Cool. I have a couple more questions from my side before we wrap it up, I guess.
Sure.
I guess just in general, or any Easter eggs. Has any Easter eggs not been discovered in any of your games, or anything
Oh
interesting?
yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. There's still a bunch of stuff that hasn't been found in most of our games. I think Luftrausers is the only game where everything has been found.
Mm-hmm. Is there
Um,
anything you would be willing to share?
no, no, that would defeat the purpose, right? No, but there's a bunch of interesting stuff. Very recently, actually, somebody discovered a secret fish in Ridiculous Fishing, which was really really cool.
Huh.
Uh, we kind of hear stories about like secrets being found like 7 or 10 years after a game came out, and we would love for one of our games to be one of those stories one day.
And it's surprising nowadays with like, YouTube videos and, forums and all that, that things like that would still be undiscovered for such a long time.
I think the trick is to make them to put things in places that don't feel like they're special,
Mm-hmm.
right? So a lot of those sort of like Easter eggs are relatively obscure or not triggered by anything that is reasonable or in a place that looks interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And that's fun. Like it's fun because like Nuclear Throne is great for that because random generation allows us with so much space to create like very very specific edge cases.
Yeah.
Um, so in Nuclear Throne we can do a whole bunch of stuff that just barely ever happens,
Hmm.
and it's okay. We can put like a completely unreasonable way too powerful enemy somewhere because it will only happen once in a million times, right?
Yeah.
Like that kind of stuff is super fun. So Nuclear Throne is kind of a like a blast to work on in terms of that sort of stuff.
Hmm. And a fan has a question. Would you ever have the throne as a playable character?
No, no. We did have Big Dog as a playable character for April Fools, but that was an April Fools joke.
Hmm.
We try to put a lot of effort into our April Fools jokes. It tends to be such a day of like simple jokes and like fake traders, and we're in the video game business. Like if we're gonna do an April Fools joke, it's gonna be a video game thing.
Hmm. Very,
So
yeah. No, I think that's appreciated.
I like it.
No, that's cool. In terms of your gaming, I know you said, as a developer, it's a little bit difficult to, play games the same way as us gamers. But do you have a favorite game so far, 2015, or something that you've been enjoying a lot, other than Nuclear Throne?
I am. I really like Destiny for a long time.
Hmm.
I thought it was very, very properly put together. I played it for way more than I should. I I watched my partner play through all of Mass Effect, which was a welcome sort of like comeback.
Hmm.
I love that universe. And then I decided to play Dragon Age Inquisition, which I didn't like, but was very impressed by, which
Hmm.
I'm not sure what that means. Like, when you play a game and while you're playing it, you kind of go like, oh my God, like, please make it stop. And then by the time it's over, you look back and go like, no, that was totally worth it.
Hmm.
That was Dragon Age Inquisition for me. Very, very, like, very thoroughly impressed. I actually reached out to one of the creative leads on that project,
Hmm.
and decided to have a drink somewhere at some event in the future. So, because I have thoughts and I need to talk to somebody who has the answers because I gen so much. There's just I don't know. I don't know how that game was ever made. It's brilliant.
No, that's awesome.
And then yeah, indie games, like a whole lot of indie games. I mean, it's been kind of a quiet year so far, I guess.
Hmm.
But it has been in pretty much every way. I've played way too much City Skylines. I'm a big fan of the Homeworld Remastered Collection.
Hmm.
I'm currently playing a game called Snakebird, which is super good. Um,
Snaker?
Snakebird.
Oh, okay.
And on iOS, I very much loved a game called Touchstone, like
Hmm.
touch and then tone, which is this weird puzzle game, but also sort of touches upon like surveillance in society.
Hmm.
Lovely games. There's a whole bunch of really really cool stuff happening.
Cool.
But yeah, it's been pretty quiet so far this year.
Yeah. And is there anything you're looking forward to in terms of the rest of 2015, whether it's a game or a gaming trend or anything?
I mean, I would love to know how the whole VR AR stuff is going to play out
Mm.
because it's just genuinely exciting. I'm looking forward to whatever Valve is cooking up in terms of everything. Like they're
Hmm.
such a big player in the ecosystem. I would love to see if consoles are going to play a bit more with early access models. Um, because I think that would be interesting. It would also sort of destroy what we know console for in an odd way, because console is kind of like here you get a complete experience that is done. Then again, is that really true anymore nowadays with like day one patches and all that? Like there's a lot of interesting shifts happening. And then finally, yeah, I want to play Just Cause 3. Like that's all I really want is I really want to play Just Cause 3. Uh,
I think
like
that's, yeah. I think a lot of
Just
us feel
Cause
the
2
same
is
way.
such a perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that trailer though. Oh my god. I made a vine of that trailer and then find it. So that's how excited I am for Just Cause 3.
That's awesome. No, and I think, again, a lot of us are looking forward to that game and a lot of other games. I think it's going to be a busy second half of the year for a lot of people.
I really hope so because the first half of 2015 just shows that our industry is not healthy.
Mm.
It's just it we the industry is not in a good spot right now. Um, and I think we're all kind of struggling with a lot of changes happening really, really, really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, console is just a different ball game nowadays. Steam is no longer a get rich quick place. Discoverability is a bigger issue than ever. Budgets for AAA games are up with the next gen, but the earnings aren't necessarily up as much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we have grown to have budgets that rival and outdo Hollywood. We have earnings that outdo Hollywood, but we don't have. We're not Hollywood. We don't have that consistency. Our studios grow and shrink really, really rapidly. We have a lot of brain drain towards other industries,
Mm-hmm.
just because it's such an uncertain industry. You work in AAA, you're unsure whether you'll be like employed in a few months. You work in journalism, you're unsure if your website will be able to survive because ad revenues are weird. You work in indie, you're always unsure if you're going to survive, or pretty much always. We're in a good spot, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like it's such an uncertain place right now, and that makes people very conservative in the choices they make. Um, and I think that's going to end up biting us. That's going to end up biting, especially AAA,
Mm-hmm.
because they're not investing in a lot of new IP.
Yeah.
But you can tell that people are starting to get fatigued with existing IP. Like Call of Duty earnings are down,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a big sign. If Call of Duty is down, like the like behemoth of this generation and previous generation, arguably, then what is next? And the answer is that nobody knows. Like
Yeah.
it's not here yet. We don't see it yet. I sure hope that there's stuff in development, but if you look at the reception for Watchdog, which was like the big new IP,
Mm-hmm.
and that wasn't too great. Arguably also because the game wasn't perfect, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's important to realize that we are in a very conservative phase right now, exactly when we need to not be that.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, a lot of my hopes are on the triple A's that dare to take risk and dare to like grow along with the industry. I've always been very impressed with how Gearbox is dealing with a lot of stuff. I think
Mm-hmm.
they're a great example. And surprisingly, like I think a lot of EA's choices in the past few years have been really really solid.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening. There's a lot of weird stuff happening, and nobody knows what to do with it. Like we all don't know what to do with it. We're just kind of like hoping that something will happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know. Like I am worried and excited because when we don't know what's going to happen, that's when the games industry is at its most exciting, I feel. But it also means that a lot of things are very uncertain right now. I guess that's kind of the games industry when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not all doom and gloom. Like I don't want to sound like we're all like in a terrible spot and the games industry is coming to an end. Um, but there are a lot of things happening right now that are just kind of like unprecedented
Mm-hmm.
in the severity in how much impact it has. We're dealing with a shift from like curated content to socially curated content. Like that's the biggest change that happened in the past few years. I think is if you look on the Steam store page, we went from having the Metacritic on that page to having the average review score. Like that is huge.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge thing. That's a huge change. And like,
Yeah.
how does the industry deal with that? Like, I don't know. So many questions.
And but you're hopeful though. You're hopeful that a lot of
Uh,
things will get answered soon though.
I mean, the thing is, this medium is so powerful. It is such a special thing. It offers so much entertainment. It offers so much joy. It offers so much perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it has so much potential with not just new technologies, but also like existing technologies. It reaches such a huge demographic, ranging from like young kids playing Minecraft to your like hardcore gamers playing playing whatever they can find to the Call of Duty slash sports slash racing audiences who are kind of like a weird category of casual gamers.
Hmm.
And then casual gamers, like we've reached so much. Like there's no way this medium is just kind of gonna collapse, right? And the things that exist now, I don't think they will collapse either. Like mobile games will be here, indie games will be here, AAA games will be here. It just turns out that whenever you add a new category, like there is a huge audience waiting for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to be around. It's just not sure like how many of what exists now are ultimately going to exist in the form they exist now, and that is both terrifying and and exciting. Like the jump of so many AAA developers to indie is exciting. Hideo Kojima's whole situation with Konami
Hmm.
is devastating and exciting. Like, what is going to happen next? Like, what does that shift mean? Where does he go? Like that. Just so many questions, so little answers. But like, give it a year, and we'll have answers, and we'll see what happened, and then we'll figure out whatever's next.
Okay. No, I don't disagree with what you're saying there. And for anyone of your fans or anyone interested in seeing you at a con or any talks, do you have a gig coming up or any place you're going to be at?
I have a lot of things coming up, as always. I am going to be, I'm for sure going to be at E3, which is happening in about a month. I will be
Okay.
visiting the Ottawa Games Convention and MomoCon. I'll be in Moscow next week
Wow.
for DEF CON.
Hmm.
And after that, I will be visiting, after E3, I'll be visiting Barcelona and Malta. And that's kind of the upcoming month or so.
Great.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, there's going to be a lot of places. Um, if people want to keep track of where I'm going to be, I usually announce where I am going to be a day before I go there because I am not aware that I have to go there until my phone gives me the alarm that I have to go to the airport.
Uh-huh.
So if people follow me on Twitter, THA_Rami, that's where I'll inform people of where I'm going.
Awesome. And I know you're so busy, you're everywhere. We really, really appreciate your time. And
Oh no, thanks so much for having me. This is super fun.
oh, great. And yeah, again, please follow Rami at THA_Rami, and please follow his channel and check out his game, Nuclear Throne. Thank you so much, Rami. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Yeah,
Have a great day.
thank you. And everyone, thank you guys for all of your time watching, and we'll be back on next week, Tuesday. Look out for an announcement at official_AIAS. So I'm gonna sign off here, and yeah, talk to you guys next week. See ya.